Yeah, it's wow. I'm glad I didn't see it.
All right. Well, it's 12:02. We've got everything recording, so we'll go ahead and open up the meeting. Do we have anybody? I guess first we'll approve the agenda. So we don't have a physical agenda, but our plan is to review these, the rule writing that was sent out. It is 111 pages. Hopefully people did have a chance. Most people had a chance to look at it. It's a lot. So I guess with that, that's our agenda, although it did sound like reading in this that there's gonna be a presentation to the group.
Well, it's not necessarily a presentation. It's more, we're going to walk through the changes, kind of the crosswalk. And I think that's a nice way from a high level perspective to give just a general, like, here's what we're doing, here's what it was, here's why we're doing it. And then from there, we can go into deeper levels of depth of what those changes are.
Travis said crosswalk, but I think he meant the CAC roadmap.
Roadmap,
There's
thank you.
three pager,
Okay.
the crosswalk goes into like every single change, that even if it was just a typo. So
Okay.
I
Thanks,
think we
Max.
need to go into that level of detail, but we certainly can.
Okay. With that, do we have anybody from the public? I see nobody in person. Do we have anybody online?
Have staff at CAC.
All right. We don't have the meeting minutes from last time, which would be normal. So we'll approve those at the next one. So I guess maybe we just jump right into the topic. Does that sound good? Yes. Work on the,
We'll do the rules first before the board.
oh,
Yeah, I think I can do a quick overview of the board
thank
meeting.
you.
Yes. So last or this month in early July, the big items of, I think, substantive note here for the CAC is one, we did welcome Betty Nielsen, who she wanted to join today, but she has a full day today that's conflicting, so she won't be able to participate with us. But she is our new finance manager. Betty has like most of her career has been working for government organizations in the finance space. She is a CPA in Oregon and Washington and has an MBA and even has worked on the auditing side of things as well. So she has a diverse set of background in many different places and has already been really useful in some of her observations and changes that she's recommended to us. And at some point she'll participate on the CAC and we'll be able to meet her directly. But today she was a little bit occupied. The big engagement with the board was a general fund revenue and ACDP annual fee discussion, which is part of the rulemaking package that we're talking about with the CAC here today. There's a note in that rule change where we don't have that rule fully filled out because we don't quite have that direction just yet for the board. It was a small technical hangup on my part that on the agenda, instead of having it listed as an action item, I had it listed as an informational item to potentially the board to give us a direction on how we want to adjust our annual fees. So that was delayed until September. Also, the board asked that we come forward with a little bit more of a breakdown of the ACDP program to understand what LRAPA's costs are, what the program's actually funding, which I think is something that the industry perspective would value and appreciate. So that will be a board discussion in September, and hopefully direction from that will be what of that ACDP annual fee base increase the board thinks is appropriate for the organization. And then finally had a request to the board for us to hold a hearing for our Title 43 asbestos rulemaking. So we're waiting still on that DEQ stringency review, where DEQ says, yes, LRAPA's rules are at least as stringent as DEQ's. Once we have that, then we will be able to go out to public notice, solicit public comment, and then have a hearing with the board. Our goal is that we'll be able to do that this fall, but still waiting on that DEQ stringency review.
Could you define ACDP?
Oh, air contaminant discharge permit.
Thank you.
So a fast way to think about it is just our state permits that we issue.
Yep.
You started? Are there some technical difficulties?
Jesse's saying she is unable to use her microphone and camera, but they're both enabled, so I'm not sure what to do for her.
Okay.
Oh, man, I don't.
Yeah, and then that was essentially all of the
One for Mike, please.
substantive, I think, components of the board meeting earlier this month.
Perfect. Travis?
Yeah, Travis, did you want?
Yeah, hold on, thank you. I appreciate how it's.
Who else wants?
Thank you.
You're sitting there. Are we gonna pull the packet up on the computer?
Yeah, I have it available. Let me see if we can get resolved. You are one of them. You, Jesse, you are one of the people that have the ability to, disable and re-enable maybe.
Huh. And I think Jesse did already leave and then come back again, but maybe that could be a kind of like the unplug it and plug back in again sometime. Was that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, still looks like her, she has to go through her microphone.
But that just,
Oh, that's-
she's muted.
Muted, yeah.
Personally.
Cause Paul turned his camera on
Oh,
and then
cover
turned it
that
off.
over it.
Yeah, Paul, oops.
This person doesn't have a Teams account. It's something.
So there we go. That's pop up account.
Paul, does your microphone turn off and on? Can you do that if you need to?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I would, I guess the only recommendation that we can think of, Jesse, is to leave and then join again. Okay, so maybe that'll fix it.
Restart.
Yeah.
Peter did mention that he was gonna try to join us, but his internet might be intermittent. So we'll keep our eyes out for if he joins Zoom right now. So. Okay,
Yep, so those are the big items for the board meeting was ACDP annual fee conversation with the board, which we'll pick up again in September. And then the board was agreeable to us putting our Title 43, which is our asbestos rules, on public notice. And we will do that when we get our DEQ stringency review.
perfect. So given the meeting in September, it will affect obviously some of what we're looking at today.
Yep.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so we'll take that into consideration and if we need to revisit, we can, so.
Ah, huzzah, there we go. Got it.
Yes, we see her.
Oh, very good.
Hi, Jesse.
Hi. Perfect.
Cool.
All right, so I get into the high level review.
Yeah, so I always have this parody for a song idea in my mind, like a Weird Al style thing, taking Motley Crue's Girls, Girls, Girls and turn into Rules, Rules, Rules. That's as far as I've gotten, and that's probably as far as I'll ever get
Yes.
on that parody. But yeah, let's talk about rules. Do you want to bring that up? Brad?
Yeah.
So we can
Just
just
see share
share the screen.
do this.
Yeah, so this is I'm not sure if I came up with this or if somebody from DEQ came up with this concept of a roadmap that breaks down the high level, like kind of rule topics into 3 different categories. We're making the change because has to be at least as stringent. We're making the change because it's consistent, or we're doing it for some other reason. And some of those kind of, there's a Venn diagram, they kind of overlap a little bit, but I've tried to put the in bold in each, the purpose of each of these changes in terms of those 3 categories. So the 14 changes that we'll go through, Baker's dozen plus 1, are arranged in order of the LRAPA title in terms of the increasing numeric title value. So starting with Title 30, our incinerator regulations, we're proposing to remove rules on solid and infectious waste incinerators that DEQ already has in their books. So rather than try and modify and recreate ours to match DEQs, we're just going to propose to implement those DEQ rules by reference, since they already have them on the books. We don't expect to get any of these types of facilities in our area. The second big one is changing the afterburner temperature requirement from 1800 degrees Fahrenheit to 1600 degrees. So the Oregon legislature took up a cause that the Crematory Association requested that they consider, which is apparently Oregon was the last state in the nation to have that 1800 degree afterburner temperature. Pennsylvania had just changed it before Oregon. So they said, hey, we can meet these particulate matter standards even at this lower temperature. So it's a win-win. So we're not spending as much natural gas, and we're still able to meet the environmental standards. So that one's a stringency because it is a House bill. DEQ has proposed a similar set of changes. That's with Director Leah Felden for her signature. It was a EQC, the Environmental Quality Commission, delegated that to the director. So we expect their version to be signed pretty soon. So those are pretty couple straightforward changes to our Title 30 incinerator regulations. And I should say, feel free to stop me at any time and interrupt and ask questions. Title 36 is about our excess emissions requirements. And then under the purpose, there's a whole block of text about some court cases that affect our reason for suggesting these changes or proposing them. In 2023, I think there was, under the Biden administration, there was a affirmative defense for Title V facilities to say that, hey, if they had a malfunction, then they have an affirmative defense for enforcement. The Biden administration removed that. And then most recently, in May 28th, 2026, the EPA rescinded that. And so now the affirmative defense is that an opportunity for states and locals to include in their excess emissions rules. However, DEQs have already removed the rules, so we need to be at least as stringent as DEQs corresponding.
Yeah, before we move on, if we could, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Ashley. I'm the Environment and Public Health correspondent at Lookout Eugene Springfield, and I'm trying to start making more LUAPA meetings. So hello, I have cards I got the names on the screen, but not expecting to do a round robin. I can.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So back to the item 3, Title 36. I had tried to remove most of these affirmative defense provisions from our rules in a previous rulemaking, but I missed a couple. And so I need to go in and make sure that those are also removed.
So I do have a question on this, though. Now that it's been rescinded, do we expect DEQ to update their rules to add it back in? And we're going to be leapfrogging back?
Yeah, no, Travis and I meet quarterly with the air quality administrator for DEQ, and they don't have any intention to, backslide, so to speak. And there's actually a House bill that says any federal rule that is passed after such and such a date, which corresponds to the beginning of Trump's term, has to be analyzed for backsliding for Oregon's rules, and that it can't go backwards. So essentially, DEQ would be prohibited from doing that under House bill, state statute. Item 4, Title 37. Let's see, so this is has to do with our ACDPs, or air contaminant discharge permits. As Travis said, these are permits that we issue to sources that are not Title V, or if they're Title V and they're getting some construction activity, they go through the ACDP process. So there are state permits. This change, let's see, what does it say?
This doesn't require renewal, I believe.
Okay, so we're removing the requirement that facilities that are assigned to general HDPs that are expiring, that they don't have to, they aren't required under our rules to submit a renewal application that just says, yes, I want to continue to be assigned to that permit. We can choose to assign them to that without them having to affirm that. So we went through recently the gasoline dispensing facility renewal process, and it was very confusing for the 107 GDFs, as they're called, because they were like, well, of course we want to stay on this permit. Why are you asking us if we want to be on the permit or not? And so it's a whole rigmarole about, yes, we're just renewing the permit, and you just need to affirm that you want to continue to be assigned to it. So this would give us an option to waive that requirement, but in certain cases, we might want updated information about their equipment and whatnot. But in this case, for the GDFs, we didn't need that. It was an exercise that was a lot of work for everybody that we didn't really need to do.
And there's like, is it like 180 or so GDFs that we have? in Lincoln?
107.
107, okay, yeah. So that's every GDF or gasoline dispensing facility, when we update that general permit, sort of has to like take action and engage, and then we have to make sure that those things are happening. It's a lot of back and forth for what presumably is from everybody like, yes, we are very interested in still keeping.
So it's administratively a paper pushing that
Mhm.
could save some time and energy is really the primary benefit of that. Just, okay, because they can always cancel if they didn't want.
And it was kind of unfortunate timing because we were asking for these renewals at the same time these GDFs and everybody else were having to submit their annual report, and they were like, well, is it the annual report or is it renewal or which one's which? Item 5 is also related to the GDFs. We're changing the fee class from 5 to 4, and the way our fee rules work is that that's an increase in fees. We're just changing it to adequately fund the work that we do for the sector.
And that's for GDFs that are not associated with another permit, right? It's,
Correct, yeah. So we do have some GDFs that are at, Title V facilities, or they're at facilities that have other kinds of permits besides general ACDPs. So yeah, that wouldn't affect them. Those sources that have for the gasoline dispensing facility at their already permitted facility.
and that fee table is part 2 annual fees?
Correct, yep.
Okay, so it's going to be going from 218 to 655.
That's correct.
And you think 655, this is an annual fee,
Mhm.
and that should cover the cost? Because it's, when we get to the ADCPs, it's going to be a percentage off the actual fees of the permit, and it's substantially more
For the greenhouse gas, it's a percentage.
for the gasoline dispensing facility. Right, when you have one associated with your permit, right, it's a percentage going from 12.5 to 20. So I'm just trying to like
Yeah, that's
compare the
percentage
cost of this compared to the cost to somebody who already has another permit who's actually getting double fee
Yeah, so
increase.
Kelly, you're referring to the other, we'll get down to it, I think, is it 11?
11.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get a comparison of what they're paying versus somebody else.
Yeah, so all the gasoline dispensing facilities are not required to report their greenhouse gas emissions. So you have to have a minimum of 2,500 metric tons of greenhouse gases per year, or, CO2 equivalent,
Okay.
in order to report. And there are no gasoline dispensing facilities that would be affected by that. But yeah, we've got to be conscious of the compounding effects these changes might have.
Once we get up on these.
I mean, they move a lot of gas, but that'd still be a lot of gas, I would think.
Yeah, pretty much need to do combustion, unless you're like a semiconductor manufacturer and you have this halogenated solvents for the semiconductor process. Hydrogen fluoride, they have non-combustion greenhouse gas emissions. So gasoline dispensing facilities fortunately don't combust the gasoline there. They're just filling the tanks.
And so those 107 that you listed are basically just gas stations, is kind of the idea.
Yeah.
And they're all under the quantity for the reporting.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're assigned to our general permit. So kind of the way the general permits work, just for context for the room, is we say, here's this one permit, it's a single permit, and that's what was just renewed every 10-year cycle. And then we assign facilities to it. So gasoline dispensing is one that like makes a lot of sense, because for us and even the applicant, for us to sit with the gasoline dispensing facility, be like, well, tell us what you're doing and what you're doing, and we'll write these rules and regulations. Like a gasoline dispensing facility is essentially the same thing. The rules and regulations are the same. So here's the one permit and people are assigned to it. And then that's the fees and such that's associated with that. And there even is an upper threshold of what that general permit will allow. So if you're moving enough gas through it, you can even get to the place where it's like, well, you kind of, it's too much to be on the general permit. So we need to give you a specific permit for that work that you're doing.
Costco is the one facility that no longer fits into the general permit. So they've outgrew that and they're on a standard ACDP, the highest level of air contaminant discharge permit they have. The Costco in Lane County is the highest, has the highest throughput of any gas station in the state. Dubious honor.
I see that. I've driven by.
We've been in
Okay.
line.
It's always the line. Moving on to item 6 now. So this is another fee class change. So we have another general ACDP fee class of permitted sources. We have 8 sources that are assigned to the fiberglass layup and reinforced plastics composite permit. And we're lowering the fee actually from fee class 1 to fee class 4. So we believe that is more a better fit for that type of permitting activity. Item 7, so another fee item.
I had a comment about item 6.
Okay, yeah, Paul.
Well, that was good to hear that the fees are going down on item 6. I presume fiberglass layup, that's mostly boat hull manufacturers, isn't it? Or does anyone know?
It's a mix. I don't believe we have any sources that are conducting that kind of activity under that permit. The couple that I know, just throw them out here, names, Lane Marble Interiors, they make, cultured marble showers and whatnot, Bishop Custom Marble. So there's a mix. There's one source that produces ball bearings or some sort of item related to that activity. So, but yeah, I don't believe we have any boat or like RV manufacturers on that. Signing up.
I just asked because there was a controversial incident where a boat manufacturer down near Medford left the state over excessive regulations, and I believe they were manufacturing fiberglass layup hulls. So the fact here that the fees are going down, is a good thing.
Yeah, they primarily these sources primarily emit styrene, which through our work in Clean Air Oregon, we've realized that it's not very toxic. It has very low toxicity. And so their emissions are low, their toxicity is low. We did a risk assessment as part of the reissuance of that permit, and with that change as far as the fees go.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul. Moving on to item 7, so table 3 from our title 37, that's another set of specific activity fees that apply to sources that are going through the Clean Air Oregon process, whether or not they're new or we've called them in as an existing source. So we previously believed that we weren't able to apply a 3% increase to that, but apparently the statute does allow for a 3% increase, up to a 3% increase in those fees. So that was clarified recently to us. We're just being consistent with DEQ there. Item number 8, this is a change that we're proposing to create a lower source cutoff level for coffee roasters. So currently we have a category for basic ACDP, category for coffee roasters that roast less than 30 tons per year. So even if you roast 1 pound of coffee per year, and your commercial operation, you're technically supposed to get a permit. So we're saying 1 ton per year. Anything less than 1 ton per year does not require a permit. So the permit would be required for sources that roast over 1 ton per year and less than 30. And then over 30, we have a general ACDP category. So trying to get a small cutoff. We had a source actually in Florence that had basically a popcorn size coffee roaster, and we through a letter, we said that they didn't need a permit, but this would clean that up so that we have a rule that points to that.
Do you anticipate that there are very many that are doing small scale?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that there are a couple, even just walking around. I walk my dog in Springfield a lot. I know coffee, what's it called?
Lovely or?
Yeah, Lovely. And then there's a new one going in that's called something else. They have a Eugene roaster as well, but so I'm not
Business name.
Yeah, but they haven't opened yet. But anyway, so something like that. Source like
Is there gonna be some sort of registration or some way of knowing in case they start selling, registration goes up, or are they gonna have to check in, or?
Yeah, I
is
mean,
it-
we could definitely, if this is something that we thought was important, we could have our inspectors get on a schedule where they go out. But, these are like, the idea here is on basic ACDPs that they're not really having emissions or activities that are of concern. So we're just keeping tabs on them.
Mhm.
If they don't even qualify for a basic, it's probably even less of a concern. So,
Yeah.
I think it would probably be complaint driven. So roasting does create odors, and that's how we often find out about problems that need to be addressed.
Okay. I know sometimes when there's a lower threshold and people don't have to do it, there's no way of kind of knowing what they're actually doing.
Yeah.
Is why I ask that, is that because they might not know but once they pass that threshold,
Mhm.
so.
Yes, I mean, that's always the component of, it is the business's kind of responsibility to understand what the rules and regulations are that we should be following. I see a big value that we can do as the regulator, especially the more local regulators, help folks kind of navigate what can be wait, what do I need to do? Having that clarity, I think, could be helpful in meeting that compliance, which is what we're ultimately after.
Yeah, even just on the educational, like, hey, it appears you're under this, but just so you know.
As you
Okay.
grow,
As
we're
you
excited
grow.
that you're growing,
Grow.
talk to us. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and just a note on that is that basic HDB category for coffee roasters less than 30 tons per year is something that DEQ doesn't have, but we've wanted to retain and expand our ability to have smaller sources. So we do keep tabs on them. So. See, item 9, we're creating a new basic ACDP category to mirror what DEQ has in their rules that allows facilities that would otherwise be required to have a higher cost or higher complexity ACDP to take either hourly or production limitations to keep them out of needing to get a higher complex permit. So that's a new basic ACDP category to be consistent with DEQ's rules there.
Limit for a certain period, or?
Yeah, so the rules technically require us to evaluate a source's emissions at capacity. So the maximum achievable production rate that they could ever achieve, and excluding any control devices. So you have to assume that they don't have a bag house, that they're just emitting without any controls. And how would their emissions be if they were operating 8,760 24/7? Often that analysis will put them into like a simple or standard HDB category, whereas they could easily accept, say, we're just going to operate that piece of equipment 1,000 hours per year, not 8,760. And so they can accept that limit and stay below those other higher thresholds.
Mhm.
And then those are the things through permit conditions and follow-up in our review. We would assure or check that they're staying below what those limits would be. Because once they're above it, then that wouldn't be in compliance with the permit that's accepting that limit, or what that may look like.
But they have the right to transition to a different, say, from basic to general. Right?
Correct, yeah, if they qualify for
Effective.
basic, they could certainly choose to do that. Item 10 is probably the most significant one from the board's perspective, as Travis was describing in the July board meeting. Due to some kind of issues with the agenda that they didn't feel like they could act on approving our proposal for an increase in the ACDP revenue in terms of annual ACDP fees. So we're just putting in a placeholder here of XX%.
And what was kind of discussed with the board as some potential avenues for the board to consider is, one, I should start by saying that our annual ACDP fees at the moment are about 35% less than what DEQ's equivalent comparable fees are. I do think a value that as a local regulator we bring to the region is we can afford a little bit of a discount saving cost. And I see that as really a board discretion of how much of a discounted cost, so to speak, we want to have. We do have increasing costs to ourselves. Our biggest expense that we pay is essentially through staff salaries and expenses. And with increases in that range, we're needing to assess the ACDP program and raise those fees on the annual basis. The proposals that I put to the board for them to consider is how many jumps do we break it over, essentially. So the first option was kind of 2 years in a row of a 20% increase to that base annual ACDP fee. Another option was 3 years, so it'd be 15% increase over those 3 years. And then the last one was essentially a 4-year, but 10% increase over those 4 years. And then also a consideration for the board on, do we want to, at the moment, annual ACDP fees increase just 4% annually, just 4% flat. I think that what could be more effective is we actually attach what 4% is, which I think has served us well, but still somewhat of an arbitrary number. How can we attach that to something that moves depending on what kind of the economy is doing? Often that can be the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, but we don't do a lot of purchasing of items. We don't really do a lot of procurement. Most of our costs, again, is just paying for salaries for work time. And so there is a employment cost index, an ECI, that is kind of published quarterly, that's more focused on just what is that cost to that white collar work type things, which is applicable to us. So the proposal to the board for us to set that annual increase on the ECI every year. I believe that in September we should have direction from the board, and we'll be able to put that into this rulemaking package.
Last key item is related to item number 11. So we're DEQ, just the greenhouse gas reporting program. They just went through a director delegated rulemaking to make this change. It was temporarily made last year. So the term was 6 months that DEQ was allowed to increase these fees from 12.5% to 20% of the applicable ACDP annual fee. So this DEQ has just made that permanent, and then we're proposing to be consistent with that. We're of course, Travis just mentioned, we're having increased personnel costs. We're also engaging with DEQ on a greater level on what's called the energy intensive trade exposed facilities. So International Paper is one of 30 or so facilities in the States that's been identified as an EITE, or energy intensive trade exposed facility, whereby they could potentially move their operations out of state to avoid these kind of regulations. So we're engaging with our sources in DEQ on that issue. We're engaging with International Paper. They're reporting directly to DEQ through their YDO program, and that's creating a little bit more work for us. And so we're just proposing to be consistent with DEQ to have the fees cover our cost of the work that we're doing for the program. Item 12, it's kind of a non-issue, but as part of the rules that were in place when the Eugene Springfield was in non-attainment of the PM10 standard, we had to create a contingency that if we were if our area didn't meet attain the national standard for PM10, there would be some backup measures that LRAPA could take to help us get there. Fortunately, we didn't need to use those. They're essentially outdated and can be repealed. DEQ repealed their corresponding rules for other PM10 non-attainment areas in 2022. That one's pretty straightforward, just a little bit of a cleanup. Item 13, our hazardous air pollutant program under Title 44, we're proposing to repeal all of the LRAPA gasoline dispensing facility rules and replace them with DEQ's GF rules that they adopted in 2024. So they've gone above and beyond what's required federally under the NESHAP that applies to gasoline dispensing facilities. It's called the 6C NESHAP. So DEQ is requiring what's called enhanced vapor recovery. So eco nozzles and some other things that are that go above and beyond just the vapor balancing controls that are required for dispensing operations. So rather than kind of like the hazardous solid waste incinerator regulations, rather than trying to recreate those, we plan to just implement those by reference. Want to make things easier, and a lot of these gasoline dispensing facilities have not just gas stations here in Lane County, but all across the state, like Fred Meyer's and whatnot. So having them all consistent will be beneficial to the business owners.
Yeah, Max, I agreed that like, instead of being like, look at those rules and those rules, and sometimes they may say the same thing and sometimes they may not say the same thing, it's better to just be like, there's the one rules. And I think that's easier for us and for the regulated community too, at least for GDS.
And then, yeah, the item 14 is just is our last kind of high level change that we're trying to flag for you guys. The EPA changed the ambient standards for PM 2.5 and SO2, and so we're just updating those to be consistent with what EPA has published.
So did ambient standards go up or down?
The PM 2.5, it was the annual standard, went from, I want to say 12 to 9 cubic micrograms per cubic meter. So yeah, it did go down.
What about the sulfur dioxide?
It also went down, yeah.
Right.
Which, but it's in the rules. That is it. I'm happy to jump into anything else. There's the crosswalk is the lists every single change that we're making. There's a notice of proposed rulemaking, which is kind of our explaining why we're making these changes and has a lot of background information. There's the SIP development plan. I think that's all that we have for you guys to look through. But
so the intent is because it's a rulemaking package, there's a lot of 100 some odd pages in this, and that's where the roadmap is the approach of like, here's broadly what the changes are as an opportunity to get the high scope, and then wherever there are questions or like, well, let's chase that one down. I think this is where we can kind of do some of that fishing or chasing.
No, that was great. Thank you for doing it, Max. You did that. Right.
yeah.
Cool. Very
So the first thing that I'll mention though, as a reviewer of this, is that because in the 111 pages, they're just taking sections out of the title, is very out of context for somebody trying to review this.
Yeah, so the red line version of the rules.
And it's one paragraph, but it's really 17 pages. So trying to kind of understand, like, you don't really know what the whole title is. So for like future stuff, I think we should probably take these on one at a time and actually understand the title itself before trying to review proposed changes.
Yeah.
And I did not give myself enough time because I knew how many pages it was, but once I actually got into it, I was like, oh. And so I kept going back and forth between DEQ, going back to the titles, and it slowed me down pretty immensely.
Okay.
But I mean, I like seeing the red lines, and a lot of them are just minor, so it wasn't too big of a deal, especially stuff that like, and I'll just be honest, I don't know enough about,
That space.
and of course, like, if it's just being referenced. I will say, as somebody who has to follow statute and rule, every time there's a reference, it stresses me out because now I have to go somewhere else to find it.
Okay.
So when you do just reference that, it feels like now you have to go, and they don't always make it easy, especially if you just reference, with all the little A, B, C, 1, 2,
Right.
3. So,
And levels, yeah, if I could respond to that, Kelly. So that was something I made a decision to, because usually we take the entire title, even if one sentence is just changing and there's 15 other pages that aren't, we typically have included that. This time, we followed what DEQ does, and they do just the whatever section is being affected, rather than including all the rest of the provisions that aren't being affected. On our last rulemaking that we took to the Environmental Quality Commission, it was like 500 pages, 600 pages with that full length red line strikeout. Because not only do you have to include the red line strikeout, but you have to include the version with the accepted changes. And so the first thing that the director, Leah Feldman, asked me to do when I addressed the EQC was to apologize for the length of the packet that we were providing for them to review. So that was in response to that. So maybe the pendulum swung too far. We can include like a linked, I don't know.
well, I understand too, because sometimes you get comments on things you're not changing and you're not proposing to change. When you give the whole thing, that's one of the ramifications of that, is like, that wasn't even.
Yeah.
That's existing, that's not being proposed.
I did feel for Max when he was kind of in the hot seat, and Leah was like, wow, of 600 pages and the expectations, the EQC sees all this. I think more to the point of view, thing for us to take and feedback and process and digest and then consider how we can course correct a little bit is more of the what is the consistency of our rulemaking? And if rulemaking is a little bit more consistent, instead of it being, a large group of titles, it's a smaller slice of just a couple titles. And so therefore that works, but it is a balance, because how much every time we move through that, we have to create, if it's a SIP, if it's a state implementation plan, that's engagement with the EPA, and then that's engagement with DEQ. So the balance is, how much of the administrative work do we take on kind of each time we go through a rulemaking, and how much of that admin work can we save kind of all at once? But then the downside to that is then, for those who are looking at this, it does become a huge body of work. So I think that's a balance. So this feedback is valuable. It's helpful.
Yeah, well, it makes me think that maybe as a CAC, we should be more familiar with the titles. Or it is difficult for me to comment on something when I'm only getting a tiny snippet of what the actual big picture is. And I think it's minor. And so maybe, again, it's not up for change. So maybe that's where I need to reel myself in, but just trying to follow and understand how this affects stuff, especially when all the deleted stuff wasn't included.
Mm-hmm.
There's one section where it listed and then maybe it's still going to be in there. It was just kind of trying to follow what the change was when it's not actually deleting. You're only seeing an insert or a change. So, and I can get to that specific if we want to get down there.
Okay.
But did you have any comments off the bat of just the review?
No, I'm just, no, it's, it is what it is, I guess, so.
Okay, well, if we can just kind of start going through then, and if people online have things, please put your hand up, or just feel free to speak up, because we have things on the screen, so we don't see the hand. But I guess, so I pulled references, and I guess one thing that stood out to me that was a little confusing is on the greenhouse reporting fee, the proposal to go from 12.5 to 20, it was already invoiced for that this year. We're already charged at the 20?
Yeah.
So is that because of the temporary
Yeah,
rules?
we use the authority by reference in the temporary rule to send out those invoices for 2026.
Okay.
It's already been included.
Okay.
And that's too, I think, is kind of where, like, on the topic of consistency, or not consistency, but frequency of rulemaking, sometimes when you're in a space where you're kind of like waiting till you have mass, rulemaking, and then you move forward with it, that kind of creates some of these dynamics where the regulated source, you're like, wait, which direction am I needing to look? And then when those questions happen, I think that is a good thing for us to see and understand, and a way that we can avoid that from occurring is with rulemaking, trying to find that balance of how regularly we're moving through our rulemaking.
So then another question on the fee stuff, when, if it were to go up, say, I noticed that your percentages were different. Some of them added up to 40, some to 45, 3 years at 15 versus 2 years at 20, that sort of, yeah. So I'm like, well, but the question is, does that include the annual 4, or is that
No,
in addition to?
that's, so it's the, if we're making that base increase of like whatever that 20% of the 15%,
24.
that is that for that year. And then only after those base increases are done, then we would move into that annual increase. So it's not we want to raise the base and then we want to tack on that 4%. It's, we're going to do away with that 4% annual and replace it with the proposed increases. And that's where do we do that over 2 years? Do we do that over 3 fiscal years? Do we do that over 4 fiscal years? And then when we're through that, which we can put into rule and follow it by rule, then we would move to that, be it the CPI or the ECI, or just stay at 4%, which is what we have done since 2018.
Yeah, because, the DEQ, it was closer to 11 or 12% was the difference between LRAPA's fees and DEQ's until just very recently. So I think that's important to know, because like when it was presented, it made it sound like for forever, we've been, significantly lower. So I think that is an important change, is that this DEQ just recently did that, and it does help justify it in a way. I do think that the way that it's written in here, as far as, there's a number of times that it says LRAP has not increased the fee since the rules were overhauled in October of 2008, other than when you add up 4% every year from 2009 to 2017, the one-time 10% increase, and the 4-year 38%. So that actually is a significant increase since 2008. And so I think saying that they haven't increased it isn't going to go over very well.
Yeah.
And it's reiterated several times.
So that's good feedback. I mean, I think that the basically saying like, okay, because from my perspective and our posturing is the 4% is important in supporting us, but we need to not take for granted. And instead of the focus on just what this base is, and that's what the rulemaking, the NPR, as proposed rulemaking, should incorporate more that annual 4% over the last few years in our describing what these fee changes are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because I really do think this is gonna have a huge impact on the industry and on the fiscal community as a whole. When I crunch the numbers for us alone, and of course, coming at it from just an industry perspective, this is substantial. Especially because, people who hold multiple permits, including DEQ permits, this is happening just across the board. And so, just taking that into consideration as well. So
I appreciate what you're saying, Kelly, and I think this was a conversation we had with the board earlier in July, is under the Clean Air Act. So we, as regulators, essentially our cottage industry of providing the regulation and making sure that businesses are getting these permits and these permits are being followed. Once the Clean Air Act was established, our industry that LRAPA exists in was born. The funding that we receive in direct grant funding under our Section 105 of the Clean Air Act, we get what's called a base grant. It's a non-competitive grant that is awarded to us because we implement the Clean Air Act. The amount of Congress support for that line item for the nation has remained unchanged, effectively flat since the 1990s. We have partner support as well in local partner dues, which did take a hit in 2008, and we haven't fully seen that come back. So the ultimate question, I think, for not just LRAPA, but this is a United States question, a nation question, in protecting our natural resources, how much of that is important for us to fund through our grant funding and kind of the government form of funding, and how much of that is a business component, and that's the question.
Yeah.
The fee schedule, if Travis had touched on it, is these changes, if DEQ was in charge of air permitting for Lake County, would be commensurate to what they currently are, where ours would even be, they're less.
Yeah.
It's not significantly less,
Yeah.
but they are less.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, and it all makes sense to me why, but I guess it's just interesting because I'm looking at just things as a whole, and every time things raise and then they raise and then construction jobs, like, it's just almost chasing the tail.
Mhm.
And one of, I'm not gonna say a lesson learned yet, but there's a really high risk that after some recent changes on a different regulatory agency in Oregon, that there are about 300 permits that may end up no longer existing because the cost has exceeded the value of those.
Mm.
And so there's gonna be less money
Mhm.
than there was before by raising the fee. And so I just look at this and it just, one of my thoughts too is this is definitely targeting, the specific permit. And my question is, if we're talking about payroll and, all these different things, shouldn't it be across the board to asbestos fees, to, applications, to late fee, like really applying this increase, maybe a smaller increase, but to all the fees, not targeting one specific type of permit? That's just kind of where my brain
Yeah.
goes.
No, and I think that's a fair question to say, well, what is the ACDP programmatic costs?
Yeah.
And what is that work and what are these fees paying for? And then help us understand and break down that. And that is what the project I'm currently working on, is to make sure that in September, what we bring to the board answers some of those questions. So the board can even have more of an insight into like what actually is these fee increases potentially funding for ORAPA.
Especially knowing that so much time gets spent on new stuff. So I was reviewing the annual report with Mike, showing how great you guys are doing with all this transparency. And one thing that just stood out to me is over 700 comments about the Amazon. I'm like, and guess who's paying for all of that response? You know what I mean? Not the new permit yet, because I don't even have one. So how much staff time was spent responding to, a steady stream of concerns and complaints? And I get it,
Mhm.
has to be done, but it's that type of thing that, like, I think the new applications or revisions or those types of things are the most time consuming. And, because of the way that LRAPA had the fees, the applications were more. They, as you had mentioned, they held up well against DEQs. And I wonder if I don't know if you get enough applications to actually have it be significant enough for the budget, but upping the applications, because we know that incredible amount of staff time is spent processing new things. So just a little bit of food for thought on
Yeah.
kind of looking at it as a little bit more holistically.
Mhm. How much can we our fees be driven by the work that we're doing and the requests we're being made to do the work? One of the things I appreciate about the Cleaner Oregon program, and this was a kind of discussed with the board as well, is the more work that we're able to be successful in working with through sources through Cleaner Oregon. I mean, each step through the process, there is kind of a fee that the source would be needing to pay on that. But that is kind of we're doing the work, and so therefore the compensation for doing that work is more unified together.
I will say on that e-commerce Amazon facility, now that it's Amazon, we can say it. At the time we didn't, it was unofficial, but Matt did a really great job, as far as efficiency and responding to all those comments. He put together a YouTube video, and so we did the people hours that we put into it was very low compared to the volume of comments that we got due to the great work that Matt did.
The fee for that indirect source permit, I think, was like around $200. So yeah.
It goes beyond like all the wildfires, right? You guys get a ton of complaints, or agricultural stuff.
Yeah.
And like, there's just a lot of things that come in that are really a very unique and separate, but of course the funding all comes from the same. And so that's where, and it is unfortunate that general funding has been cut just across the board from a lot of these agencies, because it is a community benefit. And yet now so many of them are like 90 or 100% permit,
Right.
fee driven.
I do see the future of wildfire and wildfire smoke, and like we, as a regulator, I think our stake in wildfires simply because we have the monitoring network. And then I think we're the best people to say formally and officially, like, here's where the smoke we believe to be going, and behavior change for folks. You're not breathing this, exposure to these emissions. But that's a new kind of component to the work that we've done since like 2017. And I mean, it keeps going, but we have yet to really see much direct funding specifically for wild. We have had some grants on a PM25 base grant from DEQ that we can kind of use some of that funding for some of that work. But it is a growing body of work that has not yet seen a matching growing revenue stream to support it as full as we would.
Appreciate the feedback.
Otherwise, I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
All right, so there is one thing under Title 31 to add language that requires an applicant to first request the ability.
Number are you on? 31.
31. Add language that requires an applicant to first request the ability to provide their own written response to public comments within 10 days. And I'm just curious, like, what triggered that?
Yeah, that was a DEQ change. So I'm not sure if there was some procedural thing that caused them to, want to make that change, but we're being consistent with their corresponding public notice rules. I can look into that and follow up on, give you some more context if that's helpful.
I was just curious, I'm wondering, because generally, yeah, if there are public comments received about a particular person's application, they should have a right to submit comments, but maybe it's just saying that they need to do it.
Yeah.
It just seems a little odd.
Procedural thing, yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that too, and,
So you're on the NPR page 15 then?
Yes, maybe.
Maybe.
Let me see if I've already talked about this. Okay, so yes, I'm gonna now ask about the greenhouse gas reporting program fee payer on page 15, but comparing it to the map. Because on rule item number 11, it says this increase is to offset an increase in annual program costs and will result in an annual increase of approximately $7,362. So is that total on those 16 sites?
yeah, that's the
Okay,
total
so
revenue.
that's the total.
increase.
And that's based on that percentage.
Mhm. Yeah, yes, we have a spreadsheet we use to create our invoices, and so the spreadsheet currently has the 12.5%, and I just, took that amount and placed it with the 0.2.
Okay. It's funny when you see it in that perspective, it feels minimal, but when you see it individually, it feels like a big jump. Oh,
Go through the NPR, the notice of proposed rule.
yeah, I'm just actually trying to
Bouncing
flip
around.
through, my notes to see anything that I flagged at. So does DEQ do the annual increase as well, the 3.5 or 4? Because I thought a few years ago we said that El Rapid does that, whereas DEQ does big jumps.
Yes, that traditionally has how that been, but I think it was, they had a rulemaking in 2020, I think, when they started adding maybe it was more recent than that. So it's a 3% increase or cost of the program, whichever is lower. I think, is that right, Meg?
Correct, yeah.
So they're doing that as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was
So that definitely seems like kind of a new thing, this past, like, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, that everybody every year is upping, and it doesn't take, like, a number of years to really kind of drive that price like substantially higher,
Yeah.
right? If it's 5% a year, you're talking about a 50% increase in a decade, so. But I thought they were, because I know they're doing it on the stormwater side.
And I can appreciate the business perspective in that increase over time and the feeling of that is, I mean, I see a general better approach is to have small steps consistently than to have large jumps infrequently. And just like on the employer side of it, for even us, like on healthcare costs, for example, we're having to work through what was a large jump in healthcare costs this year, that could have maybe been smaller jumps that were, implemented over the last couple of years. And in my own preference, I think those smaller jumps over the last few years prior is going to be better than trying to navigate or figure out what to do about a large jump this year. So,
It's just thinking about it from like a personal perspective. If you saw these same types of numbers with, other things in our lives, you could see how it would, be incredibly impactful to have such significant jumps. And I guess just from an industry standpoint, it is happening with every different agency all at the same time, just to let you know, so it is going to have a, whether or not that just gets directly trickled down, obviously it's up to the business on how much it cuts in, but a lot of things are slower right now. So there's less money coming in while things are going up. So it's just gonna,
well, that is where at least from my perspective, for our annual fee increases, I do think that is the appropriate place for that lever, so to speak, is with the board. I think that the board and the relationships they have and the connection throughout our region should have a better sense of, is a 2-year to get there, is a 4-year to get, like, how quickly, because that is nuance that us alone don't totally have, but with the board and their network broadly, I think can provide us with that guidance.
I think you're right. It does bring up though, when the public hearing is, I noticed it was at 12:30 on a Wednesday or something. So is that maybe the best time?
Well, that's what's proposed right now in the NPR is not what is set in any way, shape. We will bring kind of the request to hold a public hearing to the board. And then when we have that authority, then that's when we start to figure out what those items are and when they want to be and when they want to be set.
Do you have reflections, what you think might be a good time?
Not necessarily, but one thing that I was trying to get DEQ to do recently, because they're working on 1200A, the 12 WPCF, they're working on a lot of permits that are way expired. And they have a thing that you can sign up for notifications, but you end up with 30 a day for every single person who's ever applied for anything. And so having to weed through it. And so one thing I was interested in and ask them if it was possible is like, since you're working, you have a list of every one of your permittees who has a 1200 day. When the draft is ready, if you could send it to the permittees, right? They send invoices, they send notices of other things. If they could send a notice that it's now on public comment, that would be really helpful. And they said no. Something that they didn't think it would be possible. They're like, oh, but you could do it in the portal. But you don't get notice of messages in the portal until you log in the portal. You won't know to log in the portal to get a message if you don't have.
So you're essentially the ask, what you're saying is, the ask to DEQ is when you're updating this permit and it's out for public, or this rule is out for public comment, those who have the permit that this is being applicable would get a FYI to say, hey, this thing that applies to you is now open for comment.
I do think it would just be a way of kind of that transparency of encouraging people to look. That way they're not surprised either when things come out, is that they're actually being, given, and, food for thought on this. But I do think that the timing could be challenging during, work day at lunch to try to get people, involved. But hopefully things are submitted in advance.
Jesse had a comment. I can read it out loud, or
that'd be great.
Jesse, did you want to share, or would you like it read on your behalf?
I can share. I was just saying that I read through the entire packet of the proposed rule changes, and it looks like most of the things are done because they're necessary to bring us in alignment with the rules that govern us. And in that sense, I looked at it through a public health lens, and I don't see anything detrimental to public health. And that was a relief for me, to be honest. So thank you.
A follow-up to what our chair discussed was, in addition to contacting individual permit holders, I think it would probably be a good idea to, if there are associations So for instance, business associations, you know, association of general contractors or others that could be contacted
That's
as
good.
well.
idea, actually.
Things like the association for all those who lay payment, you know, for asphalt.
National Asphalt Paving Association, OCAPA,
APWA.
probably there's wood stuff.
Let's say, Kelly, though, that sounds like a water quality issue, because DEQ air quality, I know they make a point to reach out to all the affected permit holders that are being affected, and we do that here, so. And, you know, our
great.
general ACDPs, if we're changing that, we'll make sure that they get a public notice.
That's great.
From your perspective. There was one case where the the climate protection program, they were making some changes and they didn't notify the Title V sources that were affected. And they filed a lawsuit and they had to wipe all those
Oh, wow.
rules off, and had to reissue them.
Yeah, we're back to the start. And then DEQ, I don't know if they made too many changes necessarily to the rules, but they sort of did re-rack and kind of go through the process again. And it did delay what DEQ was wanting to change by about a year or so.
Good.
Oh, yeah, the emails from DQ can get a little crazy.
It's crazy.
It's like, especially on the Friday afternoon.
I said already. I know you can tell that somebody's trying to get stuff done before the weekend.
Yeah.
All right, so getting into the actual red line stuff, if we're ready to kind of move on to that. I would recommend that you do a control find for the CFR edition. Because there, some say 2016, I think there's, most of them are supposed to. But I don't think.
Okay.
So this one is 3 of 69. I think it's probably also gonna be intended to be updated. I'm not sure. Like the opacity, change of perfect consistency. Yeah, I think I'll have to spend a little bit more time personally, just because, so the first one that really kind of threw me off was on the section 34, 35 types of construction modification changes. And it looked like there was only a minor change. But when I actually pulled it, it had that laundry list and it wasn't really clear to me if that laundry list of A through D and then AA through II is gonna stay in there, or if this was replacing it. I think it's probably intended to stay in there.
Yeah, it's all staying. It's just the red language is added.
Is added, okay.
Other category of type 1 changes, others would remain.
All right, under section 370064, page 24. You're clarifying 3A to add low fee. I think probably on B it should also be.
Okay.
So. Going up a couple bullets above on U for emergency generators, I was just curious if there was any reason for that significant decrease in fee. It went from a class 2 to a 5. And maybe it's just since you're in an emergency situation, you don't know.
Which one? Sorry.
So right above that, under
Page 24.
it's
Item U.
U.
Okay, yeah, fee class 2 to fee class 5. So we've got now have an emergency generator attachment, so we don't have to do those individually. We can more efficiently attach those to an existing general HDP.
So it lowers the
Yeah.
working cost. is there, I was just wanting to confirm, there's no proposed increases in application fees, the initial application fees, right?
Correct.
Um,
Annual component.
just the annual component, not under, the specific activities either. I'm
Correct.
guessing you guys probably don't get a ton of these, so it probably wouldn't have much benefit, but you know, I would be interested to see the numbers. You know, we talked about a little bit of the breakdown of staff time. It would be interesting to see the breakdown. And that's one of the reasons I was pulling the annual report. Like, how many new applications do you guys get, or how many like modifications or for construction, that type of thing? Do you feel like that covers your costs pretty well? Type of thing would be.
Yeah, I can tell you that we don't get many new permits. So since the Cleaner Oregon rules took effect in November of 2018, we have had 2 new facilities that are simple or higher. So we have had some like new rock crushers come in, like, hey, we have a DEQ permit for rock crusher. We need to do some rock crushing in Lane County. So we've had some new general ACDPs, but for simple, standard, or Title V, we've had 2 facilities in 8 years. At Archimoto and then AFK Development.
It's no longer operating.
Right.
So yeah, increasing our initial
Shouldn't be much.
application fees isn't gonna get as much revenue.
Are you a Title V as well? Well, no, we're not. I was thinking of the Cleaner Air Oregon, because that's another thing is that when you get called in, then there's a whole different set, but you still pay for it every year for the Cleaner Air. Still a set fee. And, you know, just having gone to the board meeting and heard what kind of their perspective was like, well, you know, they get a lot for what they pay and that, and just, you know, I kind of had mentioned that from the permittee side, you know, it's the balance, right? You're paying for these other things that you haven't, you've been called in, but you're not actually under yet. And so, you know, does that money go in a pot for when you get called in, or is it just going into the overall costs, right? Kind of understanding what you are paying for, like when you're paying for Cleaner Air Oregon, but you're not one of those 3 or 5. What is that actually, is that paying for theirs? Is that paying for, you know what I mean? Just kind of try to break it down from an industry perspective of, it does help to know.
Yes, I mean, it all goes towards the general fund, but then what is that breakdown within the general fund? So because it goes to the general fund, it is kind of the one pool that our work kind of comes from. But just because that's the structure of it, doesn't mean that we don't have insight into those questions, so.
I think, you know, specifically those Cleaner Oregon kind of annual surcharges, even if this facility hasn't been called in, that funds the air toxics emission inventory work that we do triennially. So 2026 is a reporting year. We're having our simple standards and Title V's report into that. So that's part of the pay, just maintaining the program, unrelated to the specific activities that we do. But yeah, the specific activity fees in Table 3 are intended to pay for the sources work to go through the program to do the risk assessment.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing about LRAP is you guys only have a few pots with naming money, but you do so much, right? So much actually comes out of what you do, like the air toxic and stuff doesn't have its own specific thing. And so there isn't that breakdown. And so it is difficult to do a 1-to-1 of staff time versus that because it doesn't quite work that way.
Right, and this is, I mean, these are, I know that the Oregon legislature with Oregon DEQ on their air program have similar questions and are wanting to understand better, like what are fees funding and what is that work looking like? What is that going into? For LRAPA, we have 3 funds. We have our general fund and then we have our Title V fund, which is a Clean Air Act stipulation that the program has to pay for itself. So all those dollars are kept in its own spot. And then we have our grant fund, which is really just for pass through. Like if we're awarded our targeted airshed grant, we from a general fund support can do an indirect cost. We can bill for our indirect costs for admin time and things like that. But most of those dollars are to fund the program that is being implemented, which currently that's our targeted airshed grant for the bridge. So those are our 3 different funds that we have, and all of our stationary source besides Title V fees that we permit go into the general fund, which is the same place that our non-competitive 105 grant for the EAP goes to. That's where our Oregon legislature allocated funding from the state, all goes into that general fund.
Right? You guys have any questions? Anybody online? Comments, questions? of it for me. Without knowing the actual percentages and stuff, you know, I mean, I think no matter what of the three options they choose, it's gonna, you know, be about the same within a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And so I think we have, you know, pretty rough, good idea. One thing that was kind of curious to me is, would it be simpler just to match DEQs?
In like, what do you mean by?
I mean, just to have the
Whole
fee
fee
table be
table,
the
yeah.
same, or is it not? I mean, it just almost seemed cleaner, you know, as far
Yeah.
as.
I mean, from kind of to the same point with the GDFs, if you have GDFs that are in Lane County and outside Lane County, the same rules work. And that is kind of the balance of like how much, because what I see what El Rapa does is we do the state work here locally, because without El Rapa, all of the permits would still have to be issued, all of that service would still need to be provided. The plus one is we provide that service instead, and then our board does have more of an opportunity to decide how much of a discount can we provide in Lane County for that work. And then the more we're just borrowing from DEQ and their fee structure, I think the less opportunity for some of that fine tuning may exist. But yes, there is benefit and in time and clarity of saying ditto.
Well, you mentioned a discount, but this is gonna match. It's no longer gonna be less, right?
Not to the extent of that.
Well, on a lot of the,
40 and they're
the-
down by 35, then it'll be more.
we have in terms of annual ACDP fee increases that was brought to the board is the closest we got would have been within 8% by 2034.
Oh.
Accounting for DEQ's presumed 3% annual increase that they get to do, plus what our potential jumps could look like over the next few years. Then with the shift to keeping it at the annual 4% or CPI or ECI, fast forward to fiscal year 34, and we're still about 8% lesser in that annual, in that same fee category class, as what DEQ would be by the time we got to that fiscal year.
That makes sense.
Greatly appreciate the perspective though of folks who are on the other side, because it helps us have a lens.
Mhm.
Well, that's how we, you have a generosity of perspective. You hear where the friction points are, try to understand it, and then reflect on that, reconcile what you can, and then try to take a path forward that is improved based off the feedback.
Mhm. Yeah, and having, some experience with ODOT, and then, of course, the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, when they did a bunch of rule writing and fee increases. It was interesting because, we looked at where staff was spending their time, and that's not what was being paid for. You know what I mean? And it's true on all of these regulatory agencies, because laws keep getting passed for more and more oversight and requirements on all the regulators, but they don't give them more money. And that's where it's not funded. And so, either things aren't being, enforced, or it's the price just keeps going up and kind of paying for it. And so my concern too is just seeing businesses and, knowing that things are slow right now and there's a lot of uncertainty, is that it is kind of a, fragile time for some businesses, when across the board things have, as we all know, I was laughing at a loaf of bread cost the other day at the store. I was like, was that real? Price for one loaf of bread. But overall, I mean, it's really clear. Caught a lot of little typos and makes sense, I do think that putting DEQ that they did it this year would help. The 2026 increase furthered the gap.
Yeah.
Because it's true, it was closer to 11 or 12, and then, they did a significant increase, which of course just exaggerates it.
And in the NPR, giving language that makes it clearer that we have on an annual basis been raising our ACDP annual fees.
Yeah, we're certainly not trying to cover up that. Yeah, I don't know where we got that language. It was probably from a DEQ.
No, it's just funny, except for this, and this,
Except
and
for all
this. We haven't done it at all, like.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then, one other thing is talking about there was one line about saving time and saving money. Or that it should save on staff time, but you might want to reword that, it's not going to be such that it's saves money.
Mhm.
I remember that it said that.
A modest.
Yeah.
Or de minimis, maybe you could say perhaps, but.
I mean, they DEQ claimed that with the portal, right, that it would help expedite stuff, but instead it really has had the opposite impact.
Well, that, I mean, that's an example where I would just kind of, this is related, but a little tangential. I think that a place for LRAPA to grow is our own database and internal kind of like information that we have. We don't have a YDO to the degree that DEQ has a YDO. And I would love for us to have that infrastructure for a YDO. Where I would deviate a bit from DEQ's approach is again on, I think the value of LRAPA and that we are able to do that state work here locally is we have a relationship with both community members more directly, but as well as the regulated community more directly. And I don't see it would be helpful for us to set up a portal and pass on that work to the regulated community that says, log in, fill out your information. I still think there's value in that relationship, that kind of emotional, empathetic connection that we can have as we're receiving information, going through, reviewing administratively if that application, for example, is complete, and then the technical review. But we can fill our database on our behalf and just tell us what, what you're doing.
I couldn't agree more. The relationship with LRAPA is radically different and better than the relationship, just the customer service or however you want to describe it. It is much more personal, so. But yeah, I think, Dogami's looking at their portal right now and they're about 2 years past the deadline and have spent 10 times as much as they were supposed to get it up and running. And it's all supposed to be for cost savings, everybody. So it's industries in general, or, there's a lot with technology changes and just different things that are coming that, it's all trial and error. And some of it's really fantastic. Being able to even just submit things electronically saves time and energy. So.
I did highlight that section for you. That's what you.
Oh, yeah.
This is in the NPR, page 17. That was the language that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Might need.
Yeah, I see.
I mean, it's true. It's true too, just, with a big fee increase.
You can pull up, Matt, page 11, item 4. Your changes, while many of these issues are minor, they have the potential to significantly complicate and delay, cost the agency additional money. Is that what you think?
That was one of them. Yeah.
Just alternatives that we considered. So it's under the section there.
Well, in one section, you're saying this will save us money, and then another, you're like, we need more money. So.
Yeah, well, that's
It's true.
where can we save money and then where do we need to find revenue opportunities?
Absolutely.
Well, maybe, we can find the middle ground. Like you said, we can look into more resources than just the new permits and the annual fees.
Yeah, it would
That's
be
always-
just looking at all the feed tables and seeing like,
Yeah.
what if you did 20% across everything? Or what if you did 25% across everything? Because it is a shared, right? I was just looking at the titles of employees who, and you don't have, there's asbestos manager, but as far as like, there's not a breakdown of knowing how much time do we spend on, on asbestos? Because
Well, we do, so we, in our timesheets, as we log those, we ask and staff do break down, here's how much time I'm spending in the enforcement space. Here's how much time I'm spending in the kind of ACDP space. Here's how much time I'm spending on asbestos. And then that in terms of like LRAPA going through and figuring like, well, how much does each program cost? And are we getting cost recovery or otherwise, full cost recovery? The timesheets are an important part of helping to slice some of that question. And then, so then it becomes a reflection then too on like, what is that data quality, which is in our culture here, how well are people filling out those timesheets? How accurate is that data? And that's where you go through each of these places of data source, put them together and then try to understand what inferences you're drawing from that data and how applicable are they to the question you're trying to answer, which is, what is the cost of the ACDP program to LRAPA and how much of that is, where's that funding coming from?
Right. Okay.
Are the timesheets tied to different funds as well?
Well, yes, because we work on multiple different funds, and so the timesheets will inform kind of where that's coming from, where that is going. So like the Title V fund, we have direct cost, which is someone saying, yep, this is Title V work. And then indirect costs, which is like the rent, you could almost say, that the Title V program takes in the building that's servicing that program.
Yeah, and there
I
are
guess makes
things,
sense.
well, I was thinking about that because, if you have an annual burner tune-up, if you have source testing, like all of that is staff time that is built into that too. And so, are there key performance measures type things like, you have to visit every asbestos project 2 or 3 times, like just knowing that what's already kind of built into the, your minimum rules also can kind of help drive that.
Yeah.
So.
Maybe
Did we? Still running?
Jesse's mute, so I don't know if she just, I'll,
They're wanting to talk, they're trying to get you to talk, I think. No, what? I don't know. It cut out, it just dropped.
We can hear you, Jesse. I think
It cut
she-
out, so I don't know what you asked, so I would love to answer, but part of what you said cut out.
I think we were just not sure if you had meant to be off mute or not.
Yeah,
So
we were hearing some audio and we were just checking to see if you were trying to contribute or otherwise.
No, I'm just having technical difficulties.
Well, does anybody have any follow-up questions or comments or I guess next steps? Maybe talk about kind of the next steps.
So one of getting the CAC's sort of concurrence to take this to the board and ask for a public hearing is kind of the next step. We do have one more meeting with the board in September on that ACDP annual cost increase. So I think that the CAC could say that we're comfortable with this as is, knowing that that's kind of a placeholder for the board to decide. Or I think what could also be an option is the CAC wanting to reconvene on this topic again with kind of that detail being known. But it's really kind of up to the committee on how you all are feeling and what place you're at of feeling comfortable enough to giving us the green light to bring it to the board to ask for a hearing request.
Do we have quorum?
we have 5.
So I would request that before we vote or, consider advancing this would be for you to share the table of what the board is considering.
Okay.
Don't you think that the CAC should probably see the 3 options that are being weighed because it's going to be one of those, isn't it?
Yeah, my plan is in September to bring those options back to the board
As is,
as
they were.
is. And then the staff report will have more of that question that Mayor Brian Cutchin from Oak Ridge asked, which is kind of the same question that you've had, Kelly. What is that ACDP kind of program cost?
Yeah.
So it could be that the CAC after that board meeting can have a discussion on sort of how that went. And then that could inform kind of the conversation further, if that sounds like a neutral place for the committee.
Yeah. You would feel more comfortable having it go to the board first? I would feel comfortable either way, as long as they were presented with that table to know what was being put out there. So whether or not you guys want to see that today and decide, or if you just feel more comfortable, waiting until the board.
I myself would support kicking the can down the road, because perhaps we might get some people who are absent at this meeting to get their input as well. At least 2, right?
Yeah, well,
Chris.
Ben, Chris, and then I don't think Peter was able to join us at all. So we're really missing 3, yeah. Paul and Jesse, do you have a preference one way or another? Do you prefer wait, get some more information and the feedback from the board?
This is Paul, I'd go with whatever the consensus of the group is.
Jesse? Okay. Well, I think based on people in the room and the general consensus, maybe we wait
Okay.
till we have those highlighted areas filled in. But it should be fairly fast, right? Review and that sort of thing. So.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe we can move on to roundtable.
Yeah, but it is next on the,
Am I right?
yeah.
Agenda? All right. Oh, upcoming topics, obviously probably the next meeting will be wrapping this up. But does anybody have any suggestions for future topics? Don't think of any now, you can always email, Matt or myself. And then how about roundtable? Let's start with folks online. Paul, wanna go first?
I don't have anything for roundtable.
All right, thank you, Paul. Jesse, do we have a good connection?
In particular. Have some
I think so.
questions here.
Perfect.
And then come with recommendations.
I don't know. I'm torn because I'm also supposed to be in another meeting for my other CAC, and it always brings me back to shifting focus on public health, and so I would be remiss for not mentioning again, because I probably sound like a broken record, getting monitors down where people actually are. Most of our air monitoring is up on top of buildings where people are not walking around, where people are not standing waiting for buses, where people are not sitting down and eating their food. So I'm saying it again, we need better air monitors for where people actually are.
Thank you, Jesse. Mike?
InfoShare, I did contact I think I discussed this before about the asbestos concrete pipe. And SUB is pretty intransigent in not releasing any information regarding any plans that they have for replacement or locations or testing. So I pretty much hit a dead end. I did address the board and sent some emails to staff as well.
Do you know if the pipe is used for transporting water or sewage?
Drinking water.
Drinking water.
Well, there is also asbestos concrete sewer pipe, but it's to me, it's not a concern.
For sewage, yeah.
Yeah.
So is the primary concern that you were looking at the decommissioning of it?
No, the
Replace-
primary concern is the age and the fact that the pipe is probably degenerating and releasing asbestos fibers into drinking water. And one answer I did get from them is that they're only required to test every 9 years. And I'm not sure how often or where, what the results were. Out there.
That was, okay. Show my ignorance. I thought, isn't asbestos, isn't the primary concern fibers in the lungs?
There are a number of opinions on that.
Okay.
So it is regulated in water. So if it's regulated in water, it obviously is a concern to at least some folks.
Okay, so it's kind of a different approach than
Yeah,
air quality.
There
than
are
water
also some
quality.
people who
Okay.
say it's absolutely of no concern.
I would say that El Rapa's take on asbestos is when it is in any sort of abatement. So if there was pipe, be it sub or anybody else who is like, we're needing to remove this asbestos, and so we have this project, we're removing soil around this pipe, and then we want to, swap this pipe out, we would be interested in the handling of that the abatement of that asbestos on that pipe. And at that point in the project, that's where we would have a stake in it. But when it's still underground, we're not kind of at the place where our authority really stands.
Yeah, they also, they modify the pipe and make additional connections to it. and
Yeah,
stuff too.
that
So
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in that case.
Drilling and so on.
Well, that's why I asked about
Yeah.
decommission. Like if there was a plan to decommission all of it or replace it all, it would be a different story. Okay.
I don't have anything significant. I was gone for a month and the lady at the airport was like in Seattle, oh, you're going to Oregon. I'm so sorry. I'm like, what do you mean? All the fires and everything going. I was like, ooh. She said it was all over the news, but I guess we're kind of blessed here.
We're lucky so far, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And how rude to say, I'm so sorry you're going to your destination. Like, isn't that like 101 airport kind of?
I did see a 1200 air quality in Eastern Oregon.
Yeah.
It
Wow.
But technically on the AQI, we just say that's above the AQI, but in the micrograms per cubic meter, it does still keep going up and up and up and up. Yeah.
I thought 450 was.
All right, well, I don't have anything. Just want to say thank you to everybody for giving added time today and spending, some good quality kind of discussing these. And thank you to Max for putting this all together, making it pretty easy to go through. So,
I appreciate the review, and Kelly, the kind of like deeper dive that looks like you went through. Like with the asbestos rulemaking, I think we got some good questions. We got some pointed feedback that we can act on and will be better for us. Thank you.
all right, with that, we can adjourn. All right. Thank you. Thank you.